All right, hello and welcome everyone to our 7th Global Cougs Speaker Series presentation. The Global Cougs Speaker Series gives individuals from WSU and around the world a platform to share thought-provoking stories, experiences, and projects that are global in nature. The Speaker Series talks are for everyone in the WSU community. However, if you're a student, you can also attend Speaker Series talks like this one today as one of your 3 elective experiences required for each of the Global Cougs digital badges. Today, Kelly's presentation will explore themes related to the Knowledge Application badge, and it will also be recorded and shared on our Digital Badge Connect database, where you can find other elective experience opportunities. If you'd like to participate in the Digital Badge program or have any questions about it, please feel free to join us at our weekly info sessions every Tuesday at 4:30 p.m. Pacific time. It's now time to hand the reins over to Dr. Kelly Newlon, Director of Global Learning. Her talk will be roughly 40 minutes and we'll have time for questions at the end or perhaps in the middle as well. And it'll be up to Kelly to decide. So Kelly, take it away.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Jake. I really appreciate it. So for those of you who don't know me quite yet, pretty much the people who would be coming into the recording, because if it serves me right, I think half of the people watching this live are from my own family. So, but I'm Dr. Kelly Newlon. I'm the Director of Global Learning here at Washington State University. I started in January this year, and it's been quite the year coming in as Director of Study Abroad for the first time during a pandemic. So, but in my past, I've been lucky enough to travel to all 7 continents and actually with students to each of those. And through that time, I've actually had a chance to learn quite a bit about animals. And so what I wanted to do today was actually take knowledge that we have and that students are learning in the global badge system about cultural values and apply those and give you some examples through the lens of looking at animal behavior of those. It wasn't a perfect fit, but I think hopefully you'll enjoy some of these stories. But I have worked in the university administration for 22 years and got my start in study abroad clear back in 1995 as a student. But in terms of who's with us tonight, I had maybe going to do some introductions. We have a number of people who are friends, a number of people who are from the international programs, and at least one student who has logged in with us tonight. So I welcome everybody. So, and then this is hello in a few different languages. Dobry večer is one that may not seem as familiar. That is Czech for good evening. So what are cultural values though? Cultural values are ways to sort of describe typical norms and preferences of different cultures and different people in terms of how they interact with other people. So if you think about it, it's sort of like the lens they look through. So, you know, somebody might have polarizing sunglasses. Some people might have just regular old sunglasses. You might have a certain pair of sunglasses you wear for driving versus other things that you do. But different people overall look at the world in different ways, and that can affect the way that they interact with different people. So it's a useful way to have like some neutral terms, because a lot of times what happens is people will judge others based on what the cultural values are, but they shouldn't be used as judgment platforms. They should just be used as descriptors. So this, for instance, goes through this example here, explains individualism versus collectivism, or displays it, and then tells sort of within using generalizations and just common preferences, how that spans across a number of different cultures across the world. So these are all the ones we're going to look through tonight. There are 10 listed here. These are all based on research done by Hofstede related to cultural dimensions, but have been adjusted based on the Center for Cultural Intelligence, which I am quite familiar with based on some research I've done in the past. So I'm going to be using that lens tonight to talk about animal activities and compare them to human behaviors. So are y'all ready to get going? I'm assuming the answer is yes, even though you're all muted. Okay. All right. So the first one is individualism versus collectivism. And different cultures sometimes, you know, when babies are raised, for instance, they're raised sort of in ways that sort of help them become independent, or we look at raising them through the lens of being able to, for instance, self-soothe, or we look at different benchmarks in their growth related to when they can start feeding themselves or doing different things for themselves. Whereas other cultures, there's much more emphasis placed on that individual and their place in the community. At the beginning, that within the family community, but then as they go along, you know, for instance, there's more and more that's done to sort of acculturate that child into becoming more collective versus individual in their development in a lot of situations. So with animals, it's sort of similar. So as you can see here, these are pictures from a program. The one of the leopard that I have is from South Africa. The pictures of the animals in this presentation are all either taken by me or by students who were with me while I was on a program. So this picture of this leopard is actually taken by a student. And this, yeah, there was no fence. This was in Kruger National Park. But as you can probably guess, leopards are super individualistic. So when they're babies, you know, they sort of raise them as, you know, cubs and a little bit of a pride. And then females will sometimes hunt together, but most of the time they want to be pretty independent. But zebras, one of the reasons they have those stripes is because they need to stick together in order to not become prey to the predator, such as a leopard. So if anybody can count real quick and put into the chat, how many zebras do you think there are in this picture? Any guesses? There's actually a sixth one tucked back in here. So yeah, so good guess. But so that's the reason why zebras are striped, is because they want to be hidden from the leopards. And even if human eyes can't pick them out, then, you know, how could a leopard's eyes maybe pick them out? And the more of them it looks like there are, for instance, the safer they are. And the leopards know that they need to be wary because their eyes aren't necessarily telling them exactly what they're seeing. So, and it goes back to like prey predator behavior. So some of the most dangerous animals in any zoo are the zebras, believe it or not. They are so frightened, and it is so ingrained in them to prevent being eaten, that they are mean, and they are almost impossible to domesticate. So yeah, most of those zebras, when you see them in a zoo, I've worked with a lot of animal science students who go to work in zoos, and they are always like, man, just don't make me work with the zebras. So they're cute in terms of like fashion print, but nope. All right. The next cultural value is, oh, sorry, Brian, you didn't get to see one. Okay, so power distance. This is basically, so within a different structure, whether it's hierarchical or more a sense of togetherness. So the picture here on the left represents that everybody sort of has equal power. The picture on the right represents that there is a definite hierarchy, and you, like, sometimes, for instance, a person on the bottom row would maybe have to go through a person on the middle row in order to have a chance to talk to the person on the top row. So there's a definite hierarchy out there. So some of the animals that by far have the most complex system in terms of power distance are elephants. So these are pictures I took in South Africa, again, at Kruger National Park. And there's a lot of behavior going on here. And actually, when I was quizzing the students who are on this program, you know, I was using these pictures to say what behaviors are being displayed in this picture. So I can like sort of translate for you. So this big elephant here, these are all bull elephants. And in each pair, there is a larger and a smaller, like an older and a younger. So what happens with male elephants is that they are sent out from the pride or out from the group, and they go off on their own. But younger elephants, like younger male elephants, when they get sort of kicked out, they will find sort of an older male elephant to be their mentor or their groom. And they will teach them how to behave. So this is a watering tank that is there at Kruger National Park. And the first pair of male elephants that were there, where this was, this is the larger male of that pair. And when he has his trunk over his tusk like this is his way of saying, like, I'm in charge, but I'm cool. If he had had his ears a lot more flared, his trunk maybe up in the air, had been vocalizing, that would have been like, I'm in charge and I'm not cool. So, but this whole movement of having the trunk hanging over a tusk is a big deal. The other thing that's going on in this picture, you can see one of these other elephants. This is almost sort of a gesture of respect, like a handshake almost, where this elephant is reaching out to say, thank you for letting us come in. And that's very important for that elephant to acknowledge the other one who is saying, I'm here, but I'm cool. If that one had done that, it would have potentially been an insult to the dominant male, and they would have been chased off and not allowed to drink. So you can see here then the elephant sort of all enjoying a good drink together at the watering hole. But I've learned a lot of just little details like that over time on my study abroad programs. But elephants by far, to me, were some of the most fascinating that I ran into. So the next one then is uncertainty avoidance. So taking this back to the human side of things, so there are different cultures, for instance, who maybe are less danger avoidant versus others. Sometimes it's based on a need to get food or to have access to different resources. They just sort of have to throw caution to the wind in order to be able to access those. Or maybe it's something from their past. So some people might say age. With a younger age, you are less avoidant of uncertainty. And as you get older and learn better, you become more avoidant of uncertainty. So, but this little guy right here, I have been to Australia for a total of 6 weeks, and this is the only platypus I ever got to see. These guys are super elusive. They are super uncertainty avoidant. So, a lot of times I think back to like Sesame Street and what did it teach me about platypuses? And it is platypuses, not platypi. I asked several times, you never had to talk about plurals with that before. But up in the north where I was, platypuses are actually about the size of a squirrel. So this picture doesn't have anything else in it for scale because it's the only picture I could get. But it's about the size of a squirrel and they're super dark. Sesame Street, I think, taught us that they were much bigger and maybe more brown. They are like that, but in the South. So where it's a little bit warmer or a little bit cooler once you get further south in Australia. So they gain in size in order to make that happen. And they're also quite a bit more furry down there. So platypuses are super avoidant. Other really cool things about them though, they are a mishmash of different species. They've been declared mammals because the mother's nurse. However, they lay eggs like avian and other like reptile type animals. They have a bill. Their digestive system is something completely and utterly in and of itself, like kangaroos are completely like they don't have a normal digestive system that you would see anywhere else, nor reproductive system. So they, like the scientific community still is sort of at a loss of how to classify platypuses, but for now they are mammals. And the males are poisonous too, which is the only mammal that is like that. They have little spurs on their back feet that they can poison something with that would cause danger. So the next cultural value I want to cover is cooperative versus competitive. So different organizations or different groups of people, competition may be more encouraged in certain cultures, like for instance, in the US in particular in the business arena. But in other areas, like for instance, higher education, I think oftentimes more like, especially within administration, like that I work in, it's more encouraged to be cooperative. But how does that play into animals? So I know the girls on Kim Sykes' window, we're saying they wanted to learn about penguins. Well, one of the fascinating things I learned about penguins that I had never learned before this was that they build roads. And so you can kind of see in the back of this picture the different trails, and these are from the penguins, and they have their lanes. So they know, like for instance, like in the US, how we drive on the right side in some countries, left side in others. In Antarctica, and penguins are only in Antarctica, and polar bears are only in the Arctic. So if anybody, another little tidbit, but they will walk on the same side with their different trails. And you can't really see it here, but there was another trail going the opposite direction to the right of these penguins. And the other thing, when you're there, they educate you and they tell you, don't cross over their paths with your footprints, because if you do that, what could happen is you could really, really throw them off. And then there could be a pileup of penguins because you have, made the paths lead into each other. And they can't handle it. So there's very much a lot of cooperation with them in terms of knowing what to do and what the expectations are. So an example of a competitive animal, though, this guy, his name is Stoffel. And if you've ever heard of Honey Badgers Don't Care or have seen those videos, honey badgers, basically, yes, they are like Wolverines, which people from Ohio don't like Wolverines because they're the Michigan mascot. But honey badgers are very, very competitive, and they can eat anything, including poisonous snakes. So in terms of their lives, they aren't very cooperative among each other because they're really trying to go after and get different types of meat to be able to eat. So yeah. Hi, Jane. So, all right. So the next one is time orientation. People who are more short-term oriented. So this could be cultures or places that are influenced, again, by a lack of resources. So they're just thinking about what can I do tomorrow, or what do I need to do within the next week to be able to eat, for instance. Whereas some other cultures may be much more long-term, like they're thinking like they're in it for the long game. It might be actually even like agrarian cultures. So short-term, it might even be more like urban versus rural areas, because in urban areas, it's very convenient to run maybe to a grocery store, not counting in urban deserts with grocery stores, but long-term, like your people are planning further and further out. So in terms of time orientation and everyday business and what's going on, so these are some baby rhinos. They were orphaned, but the thing is that rhinos, they pair up for the long term, just like penguins do. So some of you may have heard about penguins and how they mate for life. So this is a picture of a hatchling from 5 years ago when I was in Antarctica. So one of the first one that I saw hatching while we were there. But these baby rhinos, even though they were orphaned, they would partner up with another baby rhino who was orphaned, and then they would spend their lives together in a bonded pair, sort of helping each other out and such. So they are in it for the long run. So the reason I posted this picture of, and again, this is Antarctica, this was South Africa. The reason I posted a picture of a cow being milked, this is in Costa Rica on a family stay where I had some students. So this is an Ohio State student, but it was a sustainable farm, and they milked their cows every morning by hand to make cheese, and then they would sell it to their neighbors. So cows, though, cattle, they are very short-term oriented. They know they need to be milked basically every 12 hours, or in some cases every 8 hours, depending on whether they get milked twice or 3 times a day in different situations. And if you have any questions, you can direct message Katie Blumenschein here. She comes from a former dairy farm. So my sister there, but yeah, but cattle, they're not going to wait. They get very angsty if they haven't been milked on time. So they would be very short-term time oriented. So, all right. Context. This is one of my favorite. Because what happens then, if you think about, for instance, Japanese, German, or even US communication in some way, it's very much, like bullet points, right? Get to the point, when there's an email, if you put in multiple paragraphs, we just automatically know students are not going to read it, right? Don't give me the context of everything, just get right to the point. Whereas in other cultures, if I'm communicating, for instance, with somebody in South America, there's going to be multiple communications going back and forth about how's the family, how's everything going, me updating them about what's going on in the US, and how's the football team doing, those types of things, before you get around to it. And I have been, I guess, accused of being very high context and like just telling stories that go in circles. Yeah, so, but none of my sisters are clapping right now to reaffirm that. But I do kind of lose my thoughts sometimes in the middle of it. But animals that are high context, so, oh my gosh, any type of primates. So these are some vermet monkeys in South Africa. And then this is one in Tanzania. But these guys, they're super high context. So you might think that this is a mom and a baby, but if I remember the picture right, what this is actually, it was the morning time and adults were out grooming themselves and such. But what happened then was that the younger males who didn't really have a place in the culture and society yet were actually assigned as the babysitters. So when we pulled off to the side of the road on this morning in South Africa, and you can kind of see, if you look really closely, some other youngers up in the trees and such, it was the younger males who were kind of like keeping them all under control. But everybody has a very specific place in the culture and society, and it's more complex than you would ever even imagine. They also become very sort of dynamic and complicated, like complex. So this in Tanzania, this guy had actually stolen something from somebody else, like food of some type, at this little rest stop at Tarangire, the park we were at in Tanzania. And my co-traveler, Don here, he had gone over to kind of give it what for, and tell it like, hey man, you shouldn't be doing this kind of stuff. So high context, there's a lot going on. Nothing is just ever as simple as it seems, and they need to provide that. Cassowaries, this was in the title of my presentation, and so I needed to get, something in here about the cassowaries. The impact that they have on the world is super high context. So a lot of people just think that they are dinosaur birds. I don't know how many of you, if you want to use a reaction button to clap or something, had ever really heard of a cassowary before this presentation. Okay, Tiffany gave me a surprise emoji. Okay, so a lot of people think that they look like, so they look a little bit like ostriches, but they aren't related in any way. It's that whole parallel evolution thing, where each biome needed something like this, or like this bird developed, but they aren't related, not even to emus. They're their own thing. And they are like sort of prehistoric throwbacks. This is a sharp cone on its head, its brightly colored neck, and this dark, heavily feathered body. But so a lot of people think of them as just being, they're super dangerous, Nicholas. They can hurt you. They have super long talons that they basically, like lean back and kick out, and can do some real damage to a human especially. So a lot of people think of them as being very simple birds, but what ends up becoming high context is that they serve a very complex role in the Australian environment. So they're the only birds large enough to eat the seeds of what's called the quandong tree. So if you've ever seen the movie Avatar, and those huge trees that sort of have the huge buttress roots and such, those are very important because they hold down the soils in the rainforests of Australia so they don't wash away in all of that water. They are home to a lot of major species. But what happens is that they have these cassowaries have a fairly gentle digestive system. And what they do, but for the Kwangdong seeds to actually germinate, they have to go through the digestive system of a cassowary. So without the cassowary, there's a lot of different, like if you think about dominoes, without the cassowary, there would be all sorts of species and other things like that wouldn't exist, whether it be plants or animals, because they are all dependent upon what seems like a simple act of eating these nuts, which are actually like seeds. But it's really high context, the impact that it has. So, okay. Being versus doing. This is one of my favorite. I take students, like I said, around 7 continents. And when we go places, like US college students tend to be very much doing oriented. You have goals to meet, like whether you realize it or not. Like you're taking 4, 5, 6 classes per semester. Those represent a goal, the grade that you get at the end. It's very sort of square corners and checking things off of a to-do list and a syllabus, that sort of a thing. And you take them to a country that like maybe in the Caribbean or something where people are much more being oriented and they're just going to chill out and read a book and everything's going to be okay. They don't have to be entertained. And they just freak out because like nothing is happening, nothing's getting done. This is wasted time, right? Well, I think you'll all probably agree. The most being animal I could think of was a sloth, right? Their name just means like lazy and laying around, right? So sloths move so slowly that they actually grow algae in their fur, right? Like they don't move quickly enough that they dry. They live in rainforests and such. The one here on the left was one that was rescued. These are both in Costa Rica. Pictures actually from 5 years apart. But so this one is in a rescue and you can see, it's literally just laying there with a foot kind of up on a pole. And then the one over here on the right is one that actually we spotted through through binoculars up in a tree and were able to get a good picture of it. But they are the epitome of being. They are not in a hurry to do anything. They only even, I know for some of the younger ones on this call, they only even go number 2, like every 2 weeks. That is how slow they are. Even their digestion is slow. All right. On the other hand, though, hummingbirds, holy cow. Hummingbirds, like I was lucky to even, like I had to put it on sports mode on my camera even to get a picture of its wings in this picture. Hummingbirds are just, constantly doing. And part of the reason is part of the reason is because they need to get so much sugar and their heart beats so quickly. And they have to just constantly be replenishing their energy levels. So it's just the way they're made. And the human cultures are like that as well. Some of them like gear themselves, like, people accuse sometimes in the US versus other countries. And people might actually even criticize other countries for being lazy. But it's really just a cultural norm of being, aware, like even like being mindful of themselves a little bit more, maybe than in the US. Okay. Another thing then, this is like neutral versus effective. So when somebody has a neutral face, it's sort of like someone might say they have a good poker face. Like she looks kind of angry, but you can't quite tell what this person's mood is just by looking at their face. So very neutral versus being effective. And being effective is basically like you wear your emotions on your sleeve. I have been accused from time to time of being a little bit animated and having an exaggerated affect. Okay, my sister's clapping here. Okay, my other sister types no in a sarcastic way. But animals weren't going to work for this one. This one is just a little bit too human. So there are some different animals I'm sure that you could say, like goats are probably 100 times more, have more personality than some other types of animals, for instance. But what I had to put in here was Brazil. Oh my gosh, if you know anything about Brazilian culture, I was there with a group of students during Carnival several years back, and we got to go to a samba school that was preparing for the Carnival parade that was there. And so everybody, it was just, I mean, I just wish you could hear this picture. Just drums and drums and drums. I think like I will never forget the cadence of the drums that were playing in that room that night, and just people making noise and arms throwing up in the air and that sort of thing. And so instead of though going to like the actual carnival, what we were able to do is take the students to a village that actually, believe it or not, in Brazil had an Italian and German sort of background. And what they do is for people who are sort of in their like 20s-ish, young adults. Oh, good example, David. Yeah, like dogs wagging their tail, very effective. Effective. So right, but could be because yeah, they're mimicking the mood of humans and such, and maybe evolved that way. But what they did with us in this village in Brazil, it was, you know, sort of, you walked around town. One of my students actually took over one of the drums, kind of like the Pied Piper sort of a situation. And you, they would throw mud on you at different points in it. They would hose you off, you know, but it was definitely something. And that is not something that more conservative cultures would probably do in terms of keeping their moods a little bit more like bottled up. So this one is one of my favorite, monochromatic versus polychronic, or monochronic versus polychronic. Chromatic is colors, chronic is time. So monochronic is sort of where time has one meaning. You know, so this might be for the person who can't stand being even 1 minute late somewhere, or the person who grew up being told 15 minutes early is on time is late, and late is lost, right? Like you're going to get left behind. Time has one meaning. Polychronic is maybe more cultures that are a little bit more maybe multitasky, but it could also be that they are using a different, like, I mean, time could be related more to sunrise, sunset. You know, in the US, we actually have daylight savings time. Not every country has daylight savings time. Time zones exist, but not daylight savings. In parts of India, the time is not even like on the half hour, but 15 minutes off from another time zone. So there's just really interesting ways in which different cultures perceive time. But within animals, two examples I came up with. One, the chicken, right? Like, so we all know roosters will tell you when it is sunrise, right? So, so that actually, though, I would consider polychronic, because it is not like the time that a rooster wakes up in the morning is more about sunrise, not about, you know, actually having an alarm clock built in that at 5 a.m. every day they're going to crow, right? So I would call that more polychronic, because it's more with, you know, like daylight and that sort of thing. So this other pig, like this pig, though, this warthog, this is again in South Africa. And I keep mentioning the South African pictures. But a lot of these are from other places as well. But this warthog was very much attuned to human schedules. We were at this cultural village where they were doing a dance presentation for us, like through like different types of African dance, specifically in South African regions. And, but this warthog knew every day that if she came around at 12:30, she would be there when the people were there to get their lunch after this cultural thing, and that, you know, she would get fed the scraps of anything people didn't eat. So that one is one that's a little bit of a gray area, but you know, different animals definitely, like, again, domesticated animals like cats and dogs, believe me, it doesn't matter how light or dark it is. My cat will tell me that it is time for her morning wet food treat, no matter what. So, but again, they have been more influenced by humans, like the dogs that David had brought up. So then the question becomes, like, now what? What can you do with this information? What I was trying to do with this presentation was to kind of give you a sense that people are all different. Yeah, calves know feeding time too. Thanks, Katie. So that people are different, and that, you know, placing judgment on people based on maybe the way they do things isn't always a fair thing to do. So what I encourage you to do is change the language that you maybe are thinking to yourself. Like, so for instance, like, this is weird. You know, these people seem lazy, like they're not paying attention to, like they're not showing up to appointments on time. Sort of a thing when you're abroad, maybe, for instance. But instead to say, this is different. I wonder why, right? So when you ask yourself why, then you can oftentimes get to the heart of the matter and start to really understand why things are the way they are. I have this sort of thing that never judging, you know, a book by its cover, you know, like that's a common saying. But anytime I see something happen, it's sort of on the surface, really trying not to say, you know, like pass judgment and say somebody's good or bad because of that, but to dig into it. So this exercise I have here, I'll tell you how to do it, but it's basically 5 whys. So we might say, for instance, you know, why are Caribbean cultures considered sort of, or Latin American cultures considered way more laid back? Well, you know, the why might be is because a lot of times they're more equatorial, meaning it's warmer. And so they, you know, take their time and relax midday. Whereas in the US, we're much further north, and our temperature is a little bit more like different regions, but it's a little bit more steady throughout the year and throughout the day compared to maybe somebody somewhere else like that. And so then we say, okay, so why does that matter? Or why is it that way? Well, it's that way because that's the way the earth rotates around the sun. That's the tilt of the axis. That's north versus south in terms of access to light and temperature. It relates to elevation. So we could keep going on with that up into 5 whys. That's a very simple sort of representation of that. You know, I've also heard, so I didn't end up getting the picture put in here, but I'm sorry for the younger ones, but in Ecuador, in Peru, they eat guinea pig. It's called cuy, and you might say, wow, why do they do that? Well, one of the reasons they do that is because back, especially in the time of the Aztecs, that was the only real meat available regionally. It was before other animals like cattle, for instance, were introduced into the area. Llamas and alpacas or vicuña were too valuable as in terms of power animals. So they didn't eat them so much. And they also for their wool, they were valuable. But they had guinea pigs naturally occurring. And the other thing is that guinea pigs, then they don't wreck the soil, which is one of the reasons why they were sustainable in that region. So when people need protein, what are they going to do? They're going to eat the available protein. So there, I would say they see them more as rabbits rather than pets, like wild rabbits or like wildlife. But they have domesticated them. And I'm telling you, like the ones that though are cuy, they are probably, I mean, they're way bigger, like they're twice the size of my head. Yeah, and I've got a big head. Yeah, so I just encourage you to, when you are looking at something and passing judgment, recognize that it might just be a difference in culture and it could be completely normal, but you may need to be critical yourself about your judgment and think about it a little bit more deeply. So Jacob mentioned at the beginning about the global badges. This one today is meant, or I built it around being related to knowledge application. So, you know, there's plenty of other badges that you could participate in taking advantage of. We encourage you to do that. Keep that in mind. And then I had some outtakes, just fun pictures that didn't quite fit in anywhere in particular. So David, of course, every country you go to, there are dogs. I could have used that had I thought of it for what you were talking about for affect. But also pictures of like a clownfish and them using the environment to protect themselves. Yep, and chickens. And then also this cassowary crossing sign, not the most gorgeous picture of me, but cassowaries, like it was really complicated and really interesting. Just trying to protect corridors, like ways that cassowaries could get from sort of the brush over to the ocean, like to the shore, because they needed to do that. But these other pictures are more elephant behavior. These are young males sparring before they got kicked out of the herd. And then this one, I covered it up by accident a little bit, but you can still sort of see this is like sort of a teenage sister helping a younger sister, like maybe a toddler type age, who kind of was having a tantrum, didn't want to climb the hill. So mom is kind of going on, like leading the way, like you take care of it, to one of the other sisters to be like, okay, get up, I will help you up this hill, like let's go. So okay, so with that, that is okay, so where did I go? So I have stopped my share because now I am open. If anybody had any questions or anything that they wanted to talk about, I am more than willing to answer questions that you might have. Okay, no questions?
I noticed that I didn't see any pictures where you were engaged with an animal, like it was on your shoulder or something like that. Do you have any pictures or stories or any kind of scary moments where maybe a monkey got on your shoulder and tried to fight you? Because I know that some things like that have happened to me in the past.
Yes. So, but I didn't get pictures at those moments because those were like scary moments. So I was, for instance, in South Africa, one of the most common things when you stay at Kruger National Park, you oftentimes will stay in these sort of like huts or what they call rondavels. They're like the round huts, but they don't have kitchens in them. There's more like community kitchens in a shelter house between multiple huts. So, but they all have, because tea is so important there, being a British, former British colony, they have in these shelters these machines that heat water, right? So I would go down, I had, like my instant coffee packets, and I would have maybe some like Belvita crackers for breakfast, and then have like make my cup of coffee, and then go from there to the truck where we would then like bounce around and go out seeing the park. So there were some vermits that kind of like were chasing me down, wanting my Belvita breakfast crackers, so the first time it happened to me, luckily there were some hotel staff members there who like chased them off. And through that experience, I learned that basically if you bark at them like a dog, and I'm not going to demonstrate what it sounds like, but you just turn into like a big dog and you're like, whoa, and they go running off. And they were kind of hanging out around my students who were already in this open-sided truck ready to go out for the day. And they were super impressed with my ability to chase off the vermin. The other one was, again, like in South Africa, was where I was around the most animals, because the entire purpose of the program was exotic animal behavior and watching it in the wild as well as in rehab facilities and such. But there was a day we came across this large male elephant who was in what's called musk. And the thing is that you are not supposed to wear, or you're not supposed to use, if at all possible, diesel trucks, for instance, in Kruger National Park, because the rumbling of the truck actually disrupts their ability to communicate, because they use very low sounds that human ears can't hear in order to communicate with other animals far away. And then their feet actually are very sensitive, and they can feel those vibrations, and that's how they know what's going on and who's talking to them. So Yeah, so there was a car, our truck was gas, not diesel, but then there was another vehicle that was sort of up a hill with the male elephant, like the bull elephant at the top. And I don't know if I've told my family this story, but so this truck started backing down the hill. It was diesel, and the male elephant was super mad because he was trying to mate and trying to hear the girls. It started backing up and actually started to pass us, and it's going downhill. And so our driver slash guide is like, stop, 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 because this bull elephant was like chasing them, and the faster it was going, and because it was going downhill, it was going faster and faster. So yeah, so no, I did not get a picture during that moment as we were being pseudo charged by a bull elephant. But my guide was really, really expert. And he just like bangs on the side of the truck really loud and is like, hey, like, you know better than this, quit doing that. Like, you know, you're not supposed to be doing that to us, and that sort of thing. And it was just really an interesting situation. But David actually posted in the chat that he'd had a monkey steal a bracelet right off his hand in Indonesia. When he tried to get it back, he showed me his teeth, and I ultimately had to just back off. I heard that they do that and try to hold item ransom for food, right? So yeah, he would have traded it back for food maybe. Yeah, talk about high context. Shoot. Yeah. Just thought that it wanted the pretty thing, but really just wanted food. Yeah. And it had learned how to make that happen. So, all right. Other questions?
I was going to follow up with another question. Well, outside of, do you get a sense of, you know, other, like these other cultures' impressions or how they view your American students that you have traveled with? Like, are there any commonalities that these other countries and cultures, when, like, without fail, that when you've went to all 7 continents, that a lot of these cultures have kind of a preconception about American students that you're with? And if any of the American students make them come true, or justify them, or yeah.
All the time. All the time. So Americans are typically known for being a little noisy, right? So also, for instance, taking up a lot of space on the sidewalk. Like we go places in packs and are always talking to each other as we go. We eat on the go a lot. So one time in particular, we were in Costa Rica, and the restaurant we were supposed to have breakfast in was without power. And they were trying to get it back, but they just couldn't. So I just told our driver, like, hey, like, we have a contingent, like, we have an emergency fund. Let's go to the grocery store and they can all just buy something off the shelf, and then, you know, breakfast is taken care of. Well, so we get back then to the spot where we were, because it was also our departure point to go spend some time on a beach. And the driver guy was like, why are they already going to the beach? They haven't had their breakfast yet. I'm like, no, their breakfast is like, you know, the donut type thing that they got at the grocery store. And there's like, oh, you have to have a hot breakfast in Costa Rica. And it was just, yeah. So number of times those types of things come up. Yeah. So Brian, did you have a question, or were you just saying hi? Okay, good deal. All right. Well, I think just if there's, you know, it's been 50 minutes now. So what we'll do is I'll just say, like, if you have any questions or comments, or want to connect up with with me on another thing or another time, talk animals or something sometime, you can certainly email me at kelly.newlon@wsu.edu, or figure out, I'm on Facebook. So if any of you want to see my pictures, all of my travel albums in particular are public. So anybody can take a look at in all of those pictures if you want to see a little bit more. This was the tip of the iceberg, which BT dubs an iceberg way more than 10% of it is above the surface. It's only the really big ones that only 10% is above the surface. I can talk about that. That's a whole nother presentation though. All right. All right, so go Cougs. Okay, David did have a question though. Do you find it ever an issue if students project differences where differences are actually less significant than they appear? Yeah, that's okay, David. So yes, all the time. We have, when I lead study abroad programs, we tend to have, especially if it's short-term, nightly reflections. If it's a little bit longer term, like 6 or 8 weeks, it might be like weekly or occasional reflections. But yeah, it's, there are a lot of times where students will misread situations. I'm trying to think of anything in particular right now, but, and we have to kind of recenter those types of things for them to be like, okay, so you are looking at this way out of context. And at the same time, they aren't applying enough context in a lot of situations. And that's why it's important to actually have reflection and have somebody knowledgeable leading programs so that they can point things out and say, okay, so this is where you have all become, this is how you're mistaken. So like again, one of the main ones is that like a student on a homestay in a Latin American culture or the Caribbean come back the second day and say, we did nothing. We sat there the whole night, like talking to each other, or they were reading books. I just feel like it's wasted time. No, it's not. Enjoy being. You're allowed to for a hot sec. Yeah. So. All right. Well, everybody be well. Stay safe in this era of COVID. Those of you who are local, stay warm. I know in Ohio, it's in the 70s right now. But out here, we're expecting another snowfall tonight. And David is somewhere else altogether where it's morning time. So yeah, so go David. But hopefully you're safe and warm there as well. All right. Go Cougs.
Ellie, take care.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye.